The rain-slicked streets of Seattle gleamed under the sodium glow of street lamps, but inside the grand ballroom of the Evergreen Hotel, the air was thick with the scent of fresh orchids and simmering resentment. Elena Vargas stood at the threshold, her heart pounding like a war drum, clutching an invitation that felt more like a summons to execution than a gesture of civility. It was from Marcus, her ex-husband of 5 years, the man who had once whispered promises of forever, while now flaunting his engagement to a socialite whose family name alone could buy the city block where Elena still scraped by in a one-bedroom apartment. The cardstock was embossed in gold, mocking her faded jeans and the threadbare coat she'd mended a dozen times. But it was the handwritten note inside that twisted the knife. Come see what real success looks like. Elena, bring your best dress or don't. It won't matter. She had come, not out of masochism, but because of the 3 tiny faces staring up at her from the babysitter's faded photo on her phone. They're triplets, the only good thing Marcus had ever given her before ripping her world apart. As the doors swung open and the murmur of the elite crowd washed over her like a cold wave, Elena wondered if she was walking into her own funeral, oblivious to the storm she was about to unleash. If you believe in the quiet power of kindness and the magic of second chances, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment below sharing your own story of redemption. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that good things come to those who endure. And subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more tales that warm the soul and mend the heart. We're building a community here, one heartfelt story at a time. Elena's life had not always been a tapestry of quiet desperation, woven thread by thread from the remnants of shattered dreams. 10 years earlier, she had been a wide-eyed art student at the University of Washington, her canvases alive with the bold strokes of a future she could almost taste. Galleries in New York, perhaps, or a quiet studio overlooking the Puget Sound, where she could lose herself in the swirl of colors that mirrored the chaos of her passionate heart. Marcus Hale had crashed into her world like a meteor, all sharp suits and sharper ambition, a rising tech entrepreneur whose charisma could light up a room or burn it down. He was everything she wasn't, calculated where she was impulsive, networked where she was solitary, a man who saw the world as a ladder to climb rather than a canvas to paint. Their meeting at a campus fundraiser had been electric, his hand on hers as he complimented her sketches, her laughter spilling out like wine from an overturned glass. Within months, they were married in a whirlwind ceremony on a sun-drenched beach, vows exchanged under a sky so blue it seemed painted by her own brush. But beneath the romance lurked the first cracks. Marcus's late nights at the startup, his dismissals of her hobby as she poured her soul into freelance illustrations that barely paid the rent. Art's for dreamers, Elena, he'd say with that half-smile that once charmed her but now felt like a slap. We need stability. And then, the miracle, or so she thought. At 28, she discovered she was carrying triplets, a surprise that swelled her heart even as it widened the chasm between them. Marcus's eyes had lit up briefly, visions of a perfect family man dancing in his gaze, but the pregnancy drained her body and spirit, chaining her to bed rest while he climbed higher, his company securing venture capital that turned their modest home into a showpiece of modern minimalism. The birth of Luca, Mia and Sophia, was a symphony of chaos and joy, 3 tiny bundles arriving 2 months early in the sterile hush of the NICU, their cries a fragile melody that Elena clung to like a lifeline. She spent those first weeks in a fog of exhaustion and awe, her hands raw from pumping milk at odd hours, her world shrinking to the beeps of monitors and the soft weight of her children against her chest. Marcus was there in flashes, photo ops for his LinkedIn, quick kisses before board meetings. But the real burden fell to her, the endless feedings, the colic nights that stretched into eternities, the way her body betrayed her with stretch marks like war wounds she wore with quiet pride. As the triplets grew, so did the distance. Marcus's success ballooned. His app for seamless corporate networking exploded overnight, turning him into a minor celebrity in Seattle's tech scene. His face on billboards, his name whispered in investor lounges. Elena, meanwhile, traded her easel for a part-time gig at a local coffee shop, her sketches gathering dust in a drawer as diaper changes and doctor's visits consumed her days. She didn't resent it, not then. She loved the way Luca's chubby fingers gripped her thumb, how Mia's giggles bubbled like champagne, Sophia's solemn stares piercing straight to her soul. But Marcus began to chafe at the domesticity. his eyes wandering to events where champagne flowed and conversations sparkled with ambition, not baby talk. "You're holding me back, Elena," he confessed one night over a cold dinner, his voice laced with the exhaustion of a man who saw fatherhood as an accessory, not a calling. The divorce papers arrived like a thunderclap 6 months later, citing irreconcilable differences. But Elena knew the truth. He had met Vanessa Langford, heiress to a shipping empire, at a gala where Elena had been home with a feverish Sophia. The settlement was a cruel joke, alimony that evaporated under legal fees, custody shared but skewed in his favor for stability, and the house sold to fund his next venture. Elena walked away with the Triplets, a beat-up sedan, and a heart fractured into pieces too jagged to reassemble. Those early months alone were a descent into a private hell that Elena navigated with the ferocity of a mother lioness guarding her cubs. The apartment she rented in a crumbling brick building on the edge of Capitol Hill smelled of damp plaster and regret, its single window framing a view of overflowing dumpsters rather than the sound she once dreamed of. Mornings began at dawn with the Triplets' synchronized wails, a chorus that pulled her from a bed she shared with Sophia, while Luca and Mia tumbled in a playpen fashioned from thrift store blankets. Elena's days blurred into a relentless cycle, dropping the kids at a subsidized daycare that reeked of bleach and overworked dreams, then rushing to the coffee shop where steam from espresso machines scalded her hands as she forced smiles for customers who never learned her name. Evenings were for baths and bedtime stories, her voice hoarse from singing lullabies in a language her abuela had taught her, Spanish verses of hope and hidden strength, while her own body screamed for rest. Bills piled like autumn leaves, medical copays for Luca's persistent ear infections, Mia's special formula for her sensitive tummy, Sophia's therapy sessions for the developmental delays that twisted Elena's gut with guilt, as if her exhaustion had somehow caused them. She pawned her wedding ring first, then her grandmother's locket, each loss a small death that left her staring at the ceiling at night, tears tracing paths down her temples as she whispered apologies to the shadows. Friends drifted away, their invitations drying up when Marcus's narrative took hold, the poor, unstable ex-wife who couldn't keep up. "He's better off with Vanessa," they'd murmur at parties Elena no longer attended, their pity a sharper blade than his indifference. Loneliness became her constant companion, a heavy cloak that weighed her steps as she pushed the Triplets' stroller through rain-lashed parks, watching other families picnic under umbrellas while she rationed granola bars in her purse. There were nights when despair clawed at her throat, when she held the Triplets close and wondered if ending it all might spare them a life of hand-me-downs and hollow holidays. But then Mia would stir, her tiny hand fisting in Elena's shirt, and that spark, fierce, unyielding, would ignite again. She began sketching in stolen moments, not grand masterpieces, but simple portraits of her children, their faces a map of resilience that she sold online for pennies, each sale a whisper of possibility. Change crept in like the first crocus through snow, tentative and unbidden, born not from grand gestures but from the quiet alchemy of persistence. It started with an email from an old professor, Dr. Ramirez, who had stumbled upon Elena's online portfolio during a late-night scroll. "Your light hasn't dimmed, mija," he wrote, his words a balm on wounds she hadn't realized were still bleeding. He connected her with a small gallery in Fremont, a cozy space tucked between tattoo parlors and vegan cafes, where her portraits of the Triplets, raw, emotive studies in charcoal and watercolor, hung under soft spotlights for the first time in years. The opening night was a revelation. Strangers lingered before her work, murmuring about the soul captured in Mia's half-smile, the defiance in Luca's gaze, the ancient wisdom in Sophia's eyes. A local blogger snapped photos, and overnight Elena's inbox flooded with commissions, family portraits for tech wives who saw in her art a reflection of their own polished vulnerabilities. The money was modest at first, enough for a second-hand crib and fresh diapers, but it fueled her. She enrolled in night classes at the community college, balancing syllabi with sippy cups, her mind awakening like a flower to the sun. The Triplets, now 4 years old, became her muses and her anchors. Luca with his boundless energy, building forts from couch cushions and dreaming of superheroes. Mia, the storyteller, weaving tales from scraps of fabric into imaginary worlds. Sophia, the quiet observer whose developmental leaps, first words tumbling out like hidden treasure,